All right, so tonight we're going to start reassembling the bottom end. We're going to start by installing our main bearings, crankshaft bearings. So we got to heat one of these cases up at a time. The bearings are in the house right now in the freezer. They've been in there for a while, so they should be ready to go. You want to freeze them so they'll contract a little bit, shrink, very little, but enough. This has got it like a pressure fit, I'll call it, so it's tight. So you want to freeze those, and you want to heat the crankcase in the oven about 250 degrees. You don't want to go overboard with it. This is aluminum, plus you got to put the seal in here, so you definitely don't want to get it too hot. But anyhow, here's all our parts. Took a while. These old parts are getting harder and harder to find, and I want to use as much genuine Kawasaki stuff as I could, so I had to source them from a few different places, but I think we're pretty much ready to go now. So we're going to pop one of these in the oven, and we're going to get started. All right, so while your crankcase half is heating up, make sure you have all your tools ready to go. Your bearing, your seal, that's our new seal. That's got to go in first, so we got to have that ready. Make sure you have a socket or some kind of tool to set this grease seal in. That kind of fits in there pretty good. Wish it was a little thinner. But you definitely want to push these seals in evenly. You don't want to take like a screwdriver and try to pound them in. You'll definitely ruin these. You'll bust a hole in them. Make sure you have a socket ready for the main bearing, which are still up in the freezer right now. And have yourself a hammer ready, because again, you don't have a ton of time to get these to set in there. So we're just about done here heating up, so I'm going to go grab the bearings. All right, so there's one side done. Went pretty smooth. The seal went in a little bit tight, but they're obviously supposed to go in tight. But once I got that in, this bearing almost kind of fell in. It just needed a little tap to get down in there. Then I took the socket and just gave it a couple taps to make sure. The oven's talking to me here. So anyway, that's the one side. Gonna heat up this half and we'll drop the other side in. All right, while this case is still kind of hot, I flipped it over. We're gonna put this bearing in here. It's still a little hot. Lift it up so you can see which one we're working on. That's this one here that has the two retainer bolts. That's not such a tight fit because it's got the retainers to hold it in, but it's still nice to put in when it's a little bit warm. Make sure it's not too hot when you flip it over. I've done that before, in the main bearing that you just put in, the crankshaft bearing, will plop out. All right, if you have an OEM bearing like this, one side should have writing on it. And actually this side, oh no, there it is. I'm going to say, usually they do. You can just barely see it, but it's there. So anyway, you take the side with the writing and face that down. All right, she went in. It went in a little bit harder than I expected, but a couple taps with the socket and it went right in. All right, so the same deal on this side. Get your seal. Try to get that in there without burning yourself. This socket, by the way, happens to be an 1.125. It worked pretty good. I wish this was a thin wall, would fit in there a little bit better, but did the trick. It's not quite in there yet. There we go. All right, so we got the bearing out of the freezer. These particular bearings don't have any writing on either side. They're identical, so this particular one doesn't matter which side you go. If you do have writing, typically that would be facing out this way. Basically, once the bearing's in, you should still be able to read whatever it said. All right, that's in. Looks flush. We'll let that cool down, and basically we got the two main crankshaft bearings in, and you can't see it. We got that one in also. At this point, I'm going to let them cool down, and then we'll move on to the next step. All right, so once that bearing's in, you got your two retainer bolts. You're going to put a little bit of Loctite on here. I used the blue, which is medium strength. I'm not a big fan of the red. It has its place for certain things, but if you use red, you're probably going to need heat to get it out. So the medium definitely works, which the Loctite brand is, again, it's the blue stuff. You don't need a ton of it. It's going to snug these down nice and tight. Not going to go too hard where we're going to break something, but definitely make sure it's tight, and Loctite will do the rest of it. There's probably a torque setting for these. I will check the book for that. If there's a torque setting in there, I'll share that with you. But anything that does have a torque setting, you definitely want to torque things, especially something that's internal, because you're not going to be able to get at it easy later if it loosens up. So that's it for that bearing. Again, torque setting, if we have one. I'm going to take a quick look at the book. We're going to go on and we're going to move to the other side here. We got this bushing to put in. That's this guy here. It's not a bearing, it's just a bushing. Might have to heat that up with a heat gun, but I'm going to try to give it a couple taps and see what happens here. Yeah, I'm going to knock that back out. I'm going to give this a little bit of heat. All right, so we got our heat gun. We're just going to go around here a little bit around the outside. We're going to heat that up a little bit to get it to expand. Definitely, if you're going to do this, the oven's always the best to get everything evenly, but we only need this spot, so the heat gun will work. But you definitely don't ever want to use a torch, like one of those handheld propane torches. They get way too hot, and if you heat it up unevenly, you'll end up warping this, and you'll have bigger issues than you started with. So definitely a heat gun, and even with the heat gun, just get it hot enough. All right, so we got that heated up a bit. Hopefully that expanded. This has been out in the garage all day. It's actually best if you put this in the freezer for a while, but it's like 30 degrees out. And I just got out to the garage, so this is still fairly cold. All right, looks like it went all the way in. All right, I'm back on the magneto side. This side here. We're going to put this bearing in. This is a new OEM Kawasaki. You can see right there it says Japan on it. So your writing, you want it to be facing out or up, however you want to say that. In other words, once I get that bearing set in place and put in, you should still be able to read the writing. So I'm going to get this case heated up a little bit with the heat gun again. You could throw this back in the oven. Not going to do that. I just got to get the one bearing in. So the heat gun should suffice. Definitely don't use a torch. I think I mentioned that a little while ago with the bushing we just put in. But either a heat gun or put it back in your oven. All right, we got that nice and hot. All right, she dropped in there nice. All right, so next we have this needle bearing that's going to go in. Same thing, new OEM. This should have markings on it. Try to get that to focus. There we go. Again, facing up or out, so you can read it once it's in place. I'm doing this while this case is still warm from the last bearing. I hit it a little bit more with the heat gun. Yeah, I think she's in. Went in a little tough, but it's flush.